You know what it is. That's right. It's time to talk money with your money nerd and financial coach. Now, tighten those purse strings and open those ears. It's the Money Talk with Tiff podcast.
Hey everyone, I am so excited because I have Scarlett Stanhope on the line, also known as the Biz Hippie, and she is here to talk to us about a very important topic, which is scarcity. And I've hit on scarcity, but not really dove deep into scarcity. So I wanted to have her on the podcast today to talk about it. So hey Scarlett, how are you?
Hey there, I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Yes, it's an honor to have you. So let's just hop right in for the audience. Hold on. Why am I stuttering? So let's hop right in for the audience. First and foremost, what is scarcity? Like, what does that even mean for people that are brand new to the term?
Yep. Scarcity is the belief or thought of living in not enoughness. That's another way that I like to refer to scarcity, is this idea that there's not enough to go around. There's not enough for everybody, and that there is a limited supply of whatever we need in order to survive or thrive and be happy. And so scarcity, this not enoughness, is a mindset. It's a belief, and it's not accurate to reality, but it's rooted in fear. So when you are operating from scarcity, it impacts the way that you show up in your life, the way you live your life, and it plays a big role on your relationship with money.
Gotcha. And that's so interesting. So if somebody's listening and they're like, how do I know if this is me? Like, what are some ways that scarcity, or what are some things that people have gone through, or, as examples that they can say, oh, that is what I'm feeling?
And that's such a great question, because it can be happening all the time without noticing it. And so bringing awareness to it can be really powerful. So what this looks like, or how you can tell if you're operating from a place of scarcity, is recognizing what choices are you making, what actions are you taking, and what is motivating and driving those actions. If you're taking actions, especially, money-based actions, the way that you choose to spend your money or not spend your money, the way that you choose to make your money or not make your money, if those actions are rooted in fear, worry, stress, anxiety, or not enoughness, this idea of, I don't have enough, so I need to penny pinch and stop spending. I don't have enough, so I need to overwork and work really hard so that I can have more, right? So noticing, is there fear or an underlying not enoughness that's driving and dictating the types of choices that you're making in your day-to-day life and with your money?
Yes. And, I resonate with this so much, which I'm like, anytime that I get off track when it comes to like my budgeting and things like that, I feel those fear thoughts coming over, those scarcity thoughts. I'm like, oh my gosh, if I do this, I won't have enough money for that. And if I do this, and it's just coming from a place of fear, like you said, because once I sit down and I actually look at the black and white numbers, I'm like, oh, it's not that bad. But it just goes to show, to what you're saying, how powerful our mind is.
Right. And that's the thing is, I totally agree with looking at the actual numbers. That's one of the greatest steps that you can take to eliminate scarcity, because scarcity is often not rooted in reality. It's based on these emotions and thoughts that we have about our current financial situation, about the world that we're living in, but that is often not based on the actual picture of our numbers. And in fact, when we look at our numbers, we can see things are typically not as bad as we think they are, or we have a lot more options and opportunities than we were aware of. When you're in scarcity, you feel like you don't have a choice. You feel like this is the only option. I'm stuck this way. This is just the way it is. And I'm in a fight or flight state, living my life and making decisions. Whereas when you're more tapped into your abundance and you have a clear picture of what's happening with your money, it opens up so many more doors. You can see what actually is possible and what choices you do have, and you can make decisions based off of that. And that's going to give you a totally different result.
Yeah. And, I tell people all the time, like, once you're operating in fear or any of those lower frequencies, it really hurts your creativity. it's a physiological change that happens in your brain where you can't think creatively. And so the first thing, in my opinion, is to try to get out of that mindset. So with that being said, what are some things that people can do if they do find themselves in that scarcity mindset where they can get out of that?
Well, one of the first things that you can do is notice if you are operating from scarcity in the first place, and simply noticing in your day-to-day life, when is scarcity and fear the thing that's impacting your decisions? Now, there's a caveat to this. It doesn't necessarily mean just become this overly abundant person and anything you want, you can say yes to, and just start throwing money at everything and take all your money caution and throw it to the wind. It's not that. But what it is being more conscious and intentional with the energy behind the actions that you are taking. So if you notice scarcity coming up, instead of just continuing in this autopilot reactive way that we often live our lives, taking a moment to pause and recognize that the scarcity is present. And often I like to go deeper and say, why is this scarcity present right now? What is creating this fear response in me? What is the situation or circumstance that I am seeing or perceiving that's creating fear? And then the best way to get out of that fear is to find safety and create safety for yourself. And one of the best things that you can do, especially with your money, is get clear on your actual numbers. When I work with my clients on their money, what I often see is when they slip into a very scarce state, it's because they haven't looked at their money, they haven't looked at their budget in a chunk of time. And then when they take that step to get clear on the reality, what happens is it eliminates all this fear of the unknown and all these made up scenarios that they were creating. So noticing the scarcity before reacting to it, taking a pause to tap into why the scarcity and the fear is present, and then get an accurate picture of reality so that you can create safety for yourself and make decisions based off of the current present situation and what makes the most sense for you in that moment.
Yeah. And I'm glad you hit on that last point, because I feel like, when I get clients in, most people just take the ostrich approach, which is like just head in the sand. I don't want to look at the numbers. I don't want to look at my bank account. I don't want to open my mail. I just want to ignore everything. And that's why what you said is so key, because once you start paying attention to what's going on and you start realizing that things may not be as bad as you think they are, then it's like your whole mind and everything just opens up. So I'm glad that you hit on that point for sure. Now, also, I want to hit on fear and how that manifests in our lives. I know one of the major things that I did in my journey was looking at my previous experiences and figuring out what lesson have I learned from this? So can you take us through, like, what are some things that could cause the scarcity mindsets, like some examples?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the biggest things is it's just seeped in our society currently. There's this underlying belief that scarcity is the reality. And a lot of our programming and a lot of our culture is based on this belief, right? You learn growing up that life is hard. You have to work hard. You have to make sure you get a good job. You have to make lots of money or you're not going to be able to survive. And just having a good job isn't enough. You need to be rich. You need to be wealthy. And then even then, you still need more, right? So it's this idea of there's not enough to go around and I need to work hard and compete and fight in order to survive. And so this underlying belief of survival plays a huge role and a huge impact in this underlying scarcity belief that many of us are going through our lives with, because we pick it up from our parents, whatever beliefs they were taught when they were growing up, from their parents, whatever beliefs they were taught growing up. And especially when we look back on different family generations where they really did have a hard time, where there was the Great Depression, where people were struggling to put food on the table. And so this underlying idea, this underlying belief that scarcity is just an innate part of us, just our society, impacts our current scarcity beliefs. But the reality is that even though scarcity and not enoughness seems like the obvious truth, right? It seems like that's true. It seems like that is the reality we're living in. It's actually an inaccurate picture of our world and the way that our world works. But it's been so deeply ingrained that it just appears to be true.
Yes, yes. And honestly, like as you're sitting here talking, I'm over here. I wish y'all could see me because I'm like my head is about to fall off from shaking so much. But traveling to other countries like outside of the US made me realize that we think that things are scarce. However, we are living in abundance for the most part. And it's not until you start taking these lenses off that the media puts on, or that society puts on, or that culture puts on, family, friends, everything that you're saying puts on, that you start realizing that life really isn't as bad as I think it is for the most part. So I'm glad that you hit on that because it's so true. And then going to like the family dynamics, a lot of what we're taught early on in our lives, from a family perspective is what carries over until our adulthood. And so for me, it was kind of the opposite of scarcity, honestly, but it put the people around me in positions where they had to deal with foreclosures and bankruptcies. And so then I started living a scarcity mindset not because it was scarce growing up, but because I saw what happens when you don't try to hold everything. So then I became the complete opposite. And it wasn't until like a few years ago when I started thinking more abundantly, honestly, and really thinking like, okay, Tiffany, you can still go on vacation. You can still do this. You can still do that. Because I used to be like the whole debt-free journey and debt-free. I got to be debt-free and I got to pay off this debt and any means necessary, beans and rice. I was listening to Dave Ramsey at the time, which is a scarcity mindset. But anyway, I'm just like, Tiffany, you don't have to live like this. It could be an and instead of an or.
Yes, I love that. And I say that all the time, that life really can be an and instead of an or. And I think something that's really important here is to recognize that scarcity and abundance is not based on a specific amount of money. You can have very little money and still be living in abundance and be tapped into the energy of abundance. And you can have tons of money and still be operating from a place of scarcity and not enoughness. And in fact, there are lots of very, very wealthy people who still feel like they don't have enough, who still are living in fear, who still feel like they need to get more. And they're afraid that even though they have plenty, it's going to get taken away from them. And they're still operating from that fear and that scarcity. So scarcity and abundance is not based on an amount of money. It's about your relationship to the money that you have and how you appreciate it, how you choose to use it and spend it, and doing that in alignment with the energy of abundance. Because abundance is the most natural thing in the world. If you look outside at nature, and the world of nature, it literally is abundance, right? A plant, a beautiful like tomato plant, breaks down and becomes dirt and becomes compost. And then that compost, the seeds from that tomato, it grows again and it becomes infinite amounts more of that same tomato plant, right? So nature is just ever evolving, ever unfolding, ever creating more and more abundance. And that is natural. That just happens effortlessly. And the truth is that there's enough to go around because that is the way that nature survives. And so humans, we've created this idea that that is not the case, when really when we just come back to our nature and the belief that there is enough, that we have enough, no matter what amount of money that we have, that I am living my most abundant life, that I'm creating my life, that I have control and power over my life, then that is the energy that creates abundance over scarcity.
Yes, that is so true. You just said a whole word right there, bringing nature into the picture. And so I don't want to give it all away to the audience. If people were interested in finding out more about you or more about your company, how could they find you?
Absolutely. So you can connect with me on Instagram at the Biz Hippie. I'm very active on there. So if you have questions or want to continue the conversation, please feel free to send me a message. And then something that I love to offer for my podcast listeners is I have a free abundance activation session, which is a 30-minute free session deep dive into your relationship with money, recognizing what are the scarcity blocks that have been holding you back and what's the fastest roadmap to tap you into your abundance. So if you would like a free 30-minute deep dive abundance activation session with me, you can find that on my website at www.thebizhippie.com/activate.
Awesome. Awesome. And I'll make sure I have all of those links in the show notes for you all. So if you're doing something else and you're trying to scramble and get a pen and paper, don't worry. It'll be in the show notes. Thank you so much, Scarlett, for coming on the line with me today.
Thank you for having me, Tiff. This was a great conversation.
For sure. And I'm sure the audience got a ton. Have a good day. Bye.
Thank you for listening, joining, and being a part of the Money Talk with Tiff podcast this week. You can check Tiff out every Thursday for a new Money Talk podcast. But if you just can't wait until next week, you can listen to previous podcast episodes at moneytalkwitht.com or follow Tiff on all social media platforms at Money Talk with T. Until next time, spend wise by spending less than you make. A word to the money wise is always sufficient.